The view of the city from her high-rise apartment in Boston symbolized success for Carol Williams. As a senior manager at a prestigious Wall Street investment bank, she faced difficult decisions daily. On the windowsill sat family photos showing her husband Brian's gentle smile and their son Jason. Brian worked as a project manager at a rapidly growing IT company. His mild temperament balanced Carol's sometimes sharp disposition, and the two maintained a perfect equilibrium, complementing each other. Their 8-year-old son Jason was both their pride and concern. Born with asthma, he invariably suffered attacks during seasonal changes. Though intelligent and thoughtful, Jason worried about not being able to play actively because of his illness, yet he was a curious boy who poured his passion into reading and science. Carol's mother Elizabeth lived in a quiet Boston suburb. A former elementary school principal, she had been living alone since losing her husband to a heart attack 5 years ago. Her long career as a strict educator had strongly influenced her life perspective and parenting philosophy. About 15 minutes by car from Elizabeth's house lived Carol's sister Laura, who worked as a stylist at a local beauty salon and was a single mother raising her 6-year-old son Tommy. Carol's relationship with her mother Elizabeth had always been fraught with complex tension. From childhood, Carol was expected to be the model eldest daughter, constantly demanded to show responsibility and perfection. The more Carol shone as a model student, the higher her mother's expectations became, leaving her always feeling not good enough. In contrast, free-spirited Laura with her artistic sensibilities was treated as a special child by their mother. Seeing Laura forgiven for any mistake with the excuse that she's just unique, Carol felt the unfairness even as a child. This imbalance continued even now that they were adults with children of their own. Elizabeth lavished unconditional love on her grandson Tommy, spending hours praising his drawings and listening to his adventure stories. With his energetic and cheerful personality, Tommy would jump into Elizabeth's arms every time he visited, shouting, "I love you, Grandma." Seeing this, Elizabeth's face would light up as she called him, "my precious angel," and doted on him. In contrast, Elizabeth's attitude toward the introverted and quiet Jason was noticeably cold. She would criticize his love of reading, saying, "You won't grow strong unless you play outside more," or express unscientific opinions like, "Asthma comes from mental weakness." Though deeply hurt by such words, Carol would tell herself, "Mother is from an older generation." Carol strongly wished not to repeat her own childhood experiences. While keeping her distance from her mother, she made efforts to ensure Jason could have a relationship with his grandmother. Valuing family bonds, she maintained a superficially peaceful relationship, but deep down harbored anger and sadness over her mother's unfair attitude. Still, she never abandoned her belief that family is family, hoping her mother would someday change. Brian understood and supported his wife through her complicated family dynamics. He sometimes consoled Carol saying, "Your mother isn't able to face herself," while avoiding direct confrontation with Elizabeth. It pained him to see Jason hurt by his grandmother's cold attitude, but all he could tell his wife was that, people can't be changed. The relationship between Elizabeth and Laura resembled a codependency where they compensated for each other's shortcomings. Laura immediately turned to her mother when struggling with parenting, and Elizabeth was happy to be needed. They spoke on the phone almost daily and met several times a week. Elizabeth was actively involved in Tommy's upbringing, sometimes knowing his preferences and habits better than Laura did. As Carol devoted herself to work while tending to her son's education and health, she tried not to mind these family dynamics. However, occasionally, seeing happy photos of her mother and sister posted on social media made her chest tighten. It especially hurt when Jason asked, "Why can't I go to Grandma's house? Tommy goes every week." Despite everything, Carol continued to strive for family harmony. Just as she had decided to take Jason to her mother's house the following weekend, her cell phone rang. It was an important call from the New York office. "Ms. Williams, we need you at next week's meeting with major investors." Carol held her breath. A 3-day business trip. Right when Brian also had a business trip to Chicago. And now, with Jason's asthma beginning to worsen. She took a deep breath and dialed her mother's number. "Please, Mom. It's just for 3 days." Carol listened for silence on the other end of the phone while gazing at the gray sky outside her office window. Her trip to New York had been suddenly scheduled, overlapping with Brian's Chicago trip. She frowned thinking about her son Jason. She couldn't leave him alone during this season change when his asthma was getting worse. "How is Jason feeling?" Elizabeth's voice carried a sense of obligation rather than concern. "He's starting to cough a little. But he's fine for now. I don't want him to miss school. Please, could you just watch him after school? I'll leave notes about his medication times." Elizabeth sighed deeply. "All right. But don't forget, Tommy's birthday is coming up, so I have preparations to make." Carol closed her eyes, suppressing the urge to argue. "Thank you, it really helps." The next morning, Carol lightly kissed Jason's forehead and checked his backpack containing his asthma inhaler. "Grandma will pick you up after school. Be good and listen to her." Jason nodded silently. Anxiety flickered in his eyes. "But Grandma doesn't like me." Though her heart ached at those words, Carol smiled brightly. "That's not true. Grandma is just a little different." In the taxi, Carol called her mother again to confirm Jason's medication schedule and school pickup logistics. Elizabeth simply replied, "I know," curtly. As soon as she arrived at her New York hotel, meetings began and Carol immersed herself in work. However, during the 3 p.m. coffee break, she checked her mobile phone. There were 3 missed calls from the school. With her heart racing, she hurriedly called the school back. "Mrs. Williams, Jason's asthma has worsened. We've tried contacting his grandmother, but there's been no response." The school nurse's voice was tense. Carol pressed her hand to her forehead. "I'll contact my mother immediately. I'm in New York today." Her mother's mobile went to voicemail. There was no answer at her home either. Growing anxious, Carol tried calling her sister Laura. "Hey, do you know where Mom is? Jason isn't feeling well and the school called, but Mom isn't answering her phone." Laura hesitated for a moment. Maybe she went shopping. I'll try to reach Mom later." Before returning to the meeting, Carol called the school and asked them to keep Jason in the after-school program. "My mother was supposed to pick him up, but I can't reach her." She felt embarrassed giving what sounded like an excuse. That evening, she finally received a call from her mother. "I'm sorry, I had my phone turned off. I picked up Jason. He's coughing a little but he's fine. Didn't you get a call from the school?" They said his asthma was getting worse. Carol tried to control her voice, but anger seeped through. "You're overreacting. It's just a cough. Don't worry so much." Elizabeth's voice sounded dismissive. Carol took a deep breath. "Please don't turn off your phone tomorrow. And don't forget to give Jason his medicine." The following afternoon, after completing an important presentation, Carol immediately called her mother. There had been no calls from the school, but she was concerned about Jason. The phone finally connected on the 5th ring. "How's Jason doing?" "Oh, Carol. I'm a bit busy right now." There was some rustling in the background. "What about Jason? Did you pick him up from school?" Carol stood up and left the conference room for the hallway. "Not yet, but..." Elizabeth's voice trailed off. "The school called. They said Jason isn't doing well." Fear shot through Carol's chest. "What? When did they call? Why didn't you contact me immediately?" "Calm down. It's just an asthma attack. He's used to it." "What do you mean, used to it?" Carol's voice rose. "You need to pick him up immediately and take him to a doctor." A sigh could be heard on the other end. Then Carol heard words that froze her. "I'm busy. Do it yourself." Just as Carol was about to protest, she heard another sound from the phone. A child's high-pitched voice, then cheers. Followed distinctly by Disney parade music. "Mom!" Carol gasped. "Are you at Disneyland?" After a moment of silence, Elizabeth hurriedly said, "I'll call you back." And the call ended. Carol clutched her phone with trembling hands, staring blankly at the view outside the window. Her mind had gone completely blank. Eventually, she called her sister Laura. "Laura, where are you right now?" Her voice was unnaturally calm. "Huh?" After a moment of confusion, Laura answered cheerfully. "California. We're at Disneyland. A surprise for Tommy's birthday. Mom planned it. She wanted to make a special day for Tommy." Something snapped inside Carol. While Jason is suffering from an asthma attack. While the school is making emergency calls. "Oh, is that so?" Laura's voice carried more annoyance than concern. "But he'll be fine, right? He always has attacks." "Not always." Carol's voice trembled. "I can't believe you people." She hung up and returned to the conference room. "I'm sorry, there's a family emergency. I need to cancel the rest of today's schedule." With her colleagues' surprised expressions behind her, Carol returned to the hotel and hurriedly packed her bags. Though her mind was in chaos, one thing was clear: she needed to get back to Jason. And she needed to fundamentally reconsider her relationship with her mother. While heading to LaGuardia Airport in a taxi, she called the school. "I'm coming back right away. Please don't leave my son alone." Sitting in her airplane seat, Carol gazed at the clouds outside the window. Her heart was filled with anger, sadness, and determination. Arriving at Boston's Logan International Airport, Carol checked the time while waiting in line for a taxi. 4:30 p.m. School had ended long ago. She had contacted the school again, asking them to keep Jason until she arrived. In the taxi she rushed into, Carol noticed her hands were shaking. Anger, worry, and fatigue combined to strain her nerves. Outside the window, Boston's cityscape passed by under gray, overhanging clouds. "We'll be there in 10 minutes, the taxi driver said, and Carol nodded silently. When she arrived at the school, the building was already quiet. Carol hurried to the administration building. At the reception, the school nurse, Ms. Brown, was waiting with Jason. "Welcome back, Mrs. Williams." Ms. Brown's face showed relief. Jason sat in a chair, shoulders slumped and looking vacant. His complexion was ashen, and occasional small coughs shook his body. His chest rose and fell laboriously. "Jason." Carol rushed over to embrace her son. "Mom." Jason's voice was weak, his breathing rough. Ms. Brown said worriedly, "His symptoms have been worsening since morning, and by early afternoon his breathing was clearly labored. We contacted your mother but..." Carol placed her hand on her son's forehead to check for fever. "I'll take him to the hospital right away. We used the emergency inhaler, but it didn't seem very effective," Ms. Brown continued with concern. "You might want to contact his doctor." Carol took Jason's belongings and said, "Thank you. You've been a tremendous help." While heading to Boston Children's Hospital in a taxi, Carol cradled Jason in her arms, rubbing his back while calling his doctor. "We're coming right away. Please wait for us." At the hospital, Dr. Smith was already waiting. He took Jason to the examination room and quickly began his assessment. "It's quite severe," Dr. Smith frowned. "Hospitalization is necessary. The asthma attack has become serious." Fear shot through Carol's chest. "How dangerous is it?" "If we treat it quickly, he'll be fine. However, if you had been delayed much longer..." The doctor's words trailed off. Once Jason was settled in a hospital room, Carol sat by his bedside, holding his small hand. With an IV connected to his vein and wearing an oxygen mask, Jason lay with his eyes closed, looking exhausted. "It's okay, Mommy's here," Carol whispered gently. Jason slowly opened his eyes. "Grandma didn't come," his voice came through the oxygen mask. "School called her many times." Carol was lost for words. "Grandma had a sudden emergency. Is she playing with Tommy again?" Jason's eyes held sadness. "It's always like that." Those words tore at Carol's heart. She didn't know what to say. Instead, she simply stroked her son's head gently. "Get some rest. Daddy will be back tomorrow." As night fell, Jason fell asleep from the effect of the medications. Carol gazed at the night view from the hospital room window while checking her phone. There were 5 missed calls and 3 messages from her mother. She ignored them and instead sent an email to her husband Brian detailing what had happened. The next morning, Carol woke up at Jason's bedside. His breathing was easier than the day before, but he still couldn't remove the oxygen mask. "Good morning, brave boy," Carol smiled at him. Checking her phone, she saw new unread messages. Not from her mother, but from Laura. "What's going on? Mom's crying. She says you're not answering her calls." Carol sighed. She opened her browser to check her mother's social media. There were several photos from Disneyland posted yesterday. Elizabeth, Laura, and Tommy smiling with Mickey Mouse. Carol's anger rose again. She slipped her smartphone into her pocket and asked a nurse to buy her coffee. While talking with the nurse in the hallway, her phone rang. It was Laura again. Carol answered. "What did you do?" "Mom is completely panicking." Laura's voice was accusatory. Carol controlled her voice to say, "Jason has been hospitalized. His asthma got worse." "Hospitalized?" Laura's tone changed. "Aren't you overreacting? Doesn't he always have attacks?" Carol couldn't contain her anger. "Overreacting? The doctor said it was life-threatening. If Mom had kept her promise, this wouldn't have happened. Mom just wanted to make Tommy's birthday special." "You always turn everything into a tragedy," Laura's voice was cold. Carol hung up and took a deep breath. She returned to Jason's room and stood by the window, looking outside. In the afternoon, the door to the room opened. When Carol turned around, there stood her mother, sister, and Tommy. Elizabeth's expression was rigid, her eyes red and swollen. "Carol." She seemed to be searching for words. Carol looked at her mother with cold eyes. "Why are you here now?" "I'm worried too." Elizabeth became defensive. "I came back right away." Carol was about to speak when Jason woke up. He weakly opened his eyes and looked around the room. "Grandma," his voice was small. Elizabeth put on a formal smile and approached the bed. "Jason, are you okay? Grandma's here." Carol noticed what appeared to be a gift bag in her mother's hand. Tommy ran to the bedside and cheerfully greeted Jason. He took out a small package from his backpack. "I brought this from Disney." He handed Jason a Mickey Mouse plush toy. "It's a souvenir." Jason smiled faintly. "Thank you, Tommy." As Carol and Elizabeth faced each other in a tense atmosphere, Tommy continued talking innocently. "It was so much fun. We saw all the parades and shows," he said excitedly. "I told Grandma we should have taken Jason too. But Grandma said no." Suddenly, the hospital room fell silent. "What did you say?" Carol's voice was ice cold. Tommy, unaware of the adult's change, continued innocently. "I said Jason should come with us, but Grandma said Jason is busy." The color drained from Elizabeth's face. "Tommy, that's not It's true. Tommy tilted his head. Grandma said that child is always sick, so he can't enjoy himself. Laura hurriedly grabbed her son's shoulders. Tommy, be quiet now. Carol gripped the railing of Jason's bed with trembling hands. She looked at her son's face. Understanding had dawned in Jason's eyes. He said nothing, but his expression showed a resignation beyond his years. That's enough, Carol's voice was quiet but determined. Mom, you are out of our family circle. Elizabeth raised her face. What are you saying? Family is family. Family means loving and supporting each other, Carol said calmly. You've been discriminating against Jason all along. My son, your grandson. Yet when he was suffering, you abandoned him. I didn't mean to. Elizabeth tried to excuse herself. I don't want to hear any more excuses, Carol's voice trembled. Tommy's words tell the whole story. Laura opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. Confusion and guilt flickered in her eyes. Elizabeth closed her mouth and sank into a chair. For the first time, her face showed genuine regret. As the doctor had predicted, Jason was able to leave the hospital 3 days later. Carol and Brian brought their son home and arranged for him to rest in bed. During this time, there were multiple calls and messages from Elizabeth, but Carol did not respond. An apologetic email also arrived from Laura, to which Carol only briefly replied, I need time right now. 2 weeks passed, and Jason had returned to school. His health had stabilized, and he was returning to his normal life. Carol's anger was gradually cooling, but how to repair her relationship with her mother still weighed heavily on her heart. You can't avoid her forever, Brian quietly said one night. You need to resolve this, whatever form that takes. Carol sighed. I know. But how? The next day, Carol summoned the courage to call her mother. I want to have a family meeting on Sunday. I'd like you and Laura to come. After a moment of silence, Elizabeth answered in a small voice, all right. Sunday afternoon, a heavy atmosphere hung in Carol's living room. Elizabeth sat on the sofa with a tense expression, while Laura stood by the window. Carol distributed coffee and began the conversation. I don't want to get emotional today. I just think we have issues to address as a family. Elizabeth lowered her gaze. I want to apologize. Carol looked intently at her mother's face. Mom, this isn't about one incident. It's about a problem that has continued for years. What do you mean? Elizabeth became defensive. Carol took a deep breath. Mom, since I was a child, you haven't treated Laura and me equally. And now, the same thing is happening with Jason and Tommy. Laura opened her mouth. Carol, that's... Don't deny it, Carol said quietly. We sisters have always felt it. I always had to be perfect, while you were forgiven for anything. And now my son is experiencing the same thing. Elizabeth clenched her hands. She stumbled over her words. What? Carol's voice strengthened. Just what? Why can't you love Jason the way you love Tommy? He's smart, caring, and a wonderful child. Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes. It's not that I don't love Jason. But you treat him differently, Carol said. He feels it too. Do you know how painful it is to hear an 8-year-old child say, Grandma doesn't like me? Laura sat down in a chair. Carol, it's true Mom is soft on Tommy. I noticed too. But what? Carol looked at her sister. But maybe I took advantage of it, Laura admitted honestly. It was convenient for me that Mom would take care of Tommy. Raising a child alone is hard. Suddenly, the door to the room opened, and Tommy burst in. Mom, I'm hungry. The adults fell silent in surprise. Tommy looked around the living room and seemed to notice the tense atmosphere. Is everyone angry? He tilted his head. Elizabeth forced a smile. No, Tommy. We're just having an adult conversation. Tommy walked toward Elizabeth and placed his hand on her knee. Grandma, why can't Jason play with us more? I want to be friends with my cousin. The air in the room froze. What? Elizabeth stammered. Jason and I are about the same age, but we hardly ever play together, Tommy continued innocently. Why? Doesn't he come to Grandma's house? Carol and Laura were speechless, staring at each other. The color had drained from Elizabeth's face. Tommy. Elizabeth tried to say something but couldn't find the words. Jason has asthma, so he can't always play, right? Tommy said as if remembering. But we could play games at home, couldn't we? I want to play with Jason. Tears fell from Elizabeth's eyes. She gently stroked Tommy's head and said in a trembling voice. Yes, we can. From now on, let's play with Jason a lot too. Carol held her breath. In her mother's expression, she saw a vulnerability she had never seen before. Mom. Carol quietly called out. Elizabeth looked up at Carol. I've failed as Elizabeth, her voice was earnest. You're right. I haven't been fair. She took a deep breath and continued, since your father passed away, I've been trying to fill something. He always gave Laura special treatment, and I tried to continue that. And Tommy resembles Dad, Laura said quietly. Elizabeth nodded. When I see him, I'm reminded of your father. That smile, that energy. Carol silently listened to her mother's confession. She felt like she was finally getting answers to years of questions. But that doesn't mean Jason is to blame, Carol said quietly. That's right, Elizabeth's shoulders slumped. He's a wonderful child. Sensitive, smart. I was projecting my issues onto him. Tommy, unable to understand the adults' conversation, ran off to the kitchen. Silence spread through the room again. What do we do now? Laura asked. Carol thoughtfully said, we can only move forward one step at a time. Today is the first step. Elizabeth tentatively took Carol's hand. Will you forgive me? Carol squeezed her mother's hand back. It might take time. But, we're family. On a Saturday afternoon with summer sunlight pouring into Carol's backyard, a family barbecue was being held. 3 months had passed since that family meeting. Jason had fully recovered and had just won first prize in the school science fair. He was in a corner of the yard explaining his project to Tommy. This is amazing. Tommy was gazing with interest at the solar power model. How did you make it? Jason proudly began to explain. Previously a child of few words, he now seemed to enjoy conversing with Tommy. The relationship between the two cousins had changed remarkably over the past few months. Carol smiled as she watched the two from the patio. Brian was grilling meat at the grill, and Laura was preparing salad. And Elizabeth entered the garden with a nervous expression, carrying a box of presents. Sorry I'm late, she said sheepishly. Carol smiled at her mother. It's okay, Mom. We just started. Elizabeth looked relieved. In her hands was a large frame with paper inside. Jason, Grandma's here, Carol called out. Jason turned around and approached Elizabeth, looking a bit hesitant. Hello, Grandma. Elizabeth, appearing nervous, knelt down to match his eye level. Congratulations on the science fair. You're so smart. Jason smiled shyly. Tommy also ran over, shouting, Grandma, and hugging her. Elizabeth gazed at her two grandsons and steadied her breath. I have a present for you both. She handed them the framed item. It was a handmade family tree. Jason had made it during art class at school, with everyone's faces drawn adorably. "I made this," Jason said in surprise. Elizabeth nodded. "You gave it to me. Remember?" Tears formed in her eyes. "Every day when I look at it, I think, we are one family." Carol felt a warmth in her chest. After the family meeting, Elizabeth had truly been trying to change. She had started counseling and was making efforts to build relationships with both her grandsons. Of course, habits of many years didn't change overnight, but her attitude was genuine. "Everyone, dinner is ready," Carol gathered the family. The family around the table looked like a different family altogether. Elizabeth sat next to Jason, eagerly asking about his science project. Tommy, though still interrupting adult conversations, behaved more calmly than before. After the meal, while the children played in the yard, Carol and Elizabeth found themselves alone on the patio. "Mom, thank you," Carol said quietly. "I can see you're really trying." Elizabeth gazed into the distance. "That day, at the hospital, I saw myself. An ugly version of myself." She continued, choosing her words carefully. "In trying to be the perfect mother, I failed instead." Carol took her mother's hand. "Nobody's perfect. Not even me." The two silently watched Jason and Tommy playing in the yard. The boys were playing tag, and Jason's laughter pleasantly reached Carol's ears. "Families are difficult, aren't they?" Elizabeth murmured. Carol smiled. "But they're irreplaceable." In the soft light of dusk, their new family story was beginning.